All right. All right, so here we are. Yeah, we are live now. Hopefully it works right. I figured out how to do EFAP chat. I figured out how to do EFAP chat. I have effectively copied them now. Yay. Anyway, so let's get into this immediately. I'm not going to do any more stream build up or outro stuff. It's just going to start and stop. This is how it's going to be. This guy is terrible, Vangaris. Yes, I am aware. It's quite bad, some of the points he makes. The bad thing is, he's got the ability to make some good points, and then he proceeds to make them in the most sour way possible. Oftentimes, it's kind of annoying, actually. Well done. Yeah, I know. I figured it out. So, yeah, now I don't have to spend a bunch of time re-recording stuff. I figured things out. I feel smart. Mom, get the camera. All right, so yeah, so I've got no preamble for this. So you did it. Oh, good boy. Head pat. Thank you. I feel good. I feel the warm fuzzies for the head pat. Anyway, let's. I have no preamble for this. So let's just go ahead and get right into the video here. This is going to be. See what video is this? This is video 4 of 11. This one's about 11 minutes long, and it's going over 8 directional movement, or it's going over movement in general. So let's take a look, see, and see how it does. I don't know why it's loading forever, but this is where we are. That last video we covered was actually his most recent one he's made after looking at his channel. Really? So these aren't like in a playlist in order. I'm curious now. Let's see. This came out 8 months ago.
And for some weird reason...
See, this came out 8 months ago.
Perhaps.
Oh yeah, this came out 4 months ago. That's strange. That's weird.
Scholar of the Fist.
That's a weird thing to have a playlist out of order like that. Strange. Thanks for pointing that out, Andrew. I would not have noticed that. Anyway, let's see what he's going to say here.
Scholar of the First Sin employs snap points into the movement. This means that there are only so many directions your character can walk at will.
And the thing is, like, you can turn a little bit if you find the sweet spot. Like that. That's the least I can turn it. That is dumb.
You can also turn a little bit if you just use the right stick on your controller. Seems like he considers the movement to be objectively bad just because he never even considered to turn the camera.
Well, we're 30 seconds in. He's already made a point completely missing the point of Mahler's clip. Mahler's talking about how the movement itself is problematic. The basic control of movement with the movement controlling stick is the problem. Right? The fact that that movement stick has issues with traversing different things is the problem, when the previous games didn't have that for console players. Now, this is one thing. The PC versions of the game have a similar problem between Dark Souls 1 and 2. They both have the directional movement problem, but that's because we're using keyboards. So we're using WASD or whatever you map them to. We don't have an actual joystick that has a 360 detection sort of system, right? So PC's kind of screwed in that regard. But in terms of like the point that Mahler was making, on console at least, you should have a much wider range of movement than 8 snap points of forward, diagonal right, right, diagonal right, backwards, backwards, backwards left, left, diagonal forward left, right? Like you should have more options than just those, right? And this is a thing that the console version suffered from of Dark Souls 2, whereas Dark Souls 1 doesn't appear to have that based on different things I've seen. All right, and that's not to say that the camera can't get around that, but the root of the problem is still that the movement is screwed. So if you're using your camera for something else, you're basically screwed based on Mahler's logic and based on Domo's own logic in this short little clip we've seen so far. Oh my god. This is where it begins.
I can turn any direction at will, so I would categorize his complaint as it's bad because it's different kind of argument and an unwillingness to adapt to minor changes.
An unwillingness to adapt to minor changes, what? You mean like screwing up movement where it's more restrictive for no reason? I mean, again, this comes back to the point I've made several times, is like, if Dark Souls 2 was the first game in this series, it would get a lot of leeway for the criticisms it has, because it would be the first one. People would be willing to give it a pass. Because they've done this right twice, they should have gotten it right a third time. Right? If they got it right once and screwed it up, then that was just lightning in a bottle, that unrepeatable, right? But if they got it right twice, with Demon Souls and Dark Souls, they should get it right on the third attempt. The fact that they didn't shows a lot about the developers of Dark Souls 2 by comparison to the developers of Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls. Right? This is one of those things where he's nitpicking an argument and completely forgetting that this does not defend the game. You know, this is meant to be a gotcha against Mahler's integrity when it doesn't disprove anything he says. If anything, you're admitting there is a problem and then just ignoring his complaint of it, saying, oh, but you can get around it by using the camera. It's like, that doesn't fix the problem that the movement still has the snap point problem. Like, you're not actually fixing the issue. Like, you're not countering his argument. You're just saying that there is a way around it. You know, it's similar to the ADP thing, right? Like, you can level ADP to get your iframes up. Yeah. But the other games had iframes based on things that would change depending on your build. It wasn't something you had to level up, right? It was about your armor value and roll speed that affected your iframes in the previous games. You know, why change that is essentially the question, right? And the reason they changed it was to make the game harder in the case of ADP. For this case, I have no idea if they actually actively made a change for this or if the developers were just lazy with the movement. I don't know, but it's one of those weird things where he's making this out as if it's a gotcha moment when you're just highlighting the same problem and that there's a way around it. It's like, yeah, but the problem didn't need to be there in the first place. They've done this right before. Why'd they screw it up now? Really think Domo is a massive. He might be. Oh, wait, I didn't look at the chapters of this. I'm not sure what it went over. So, we got 8 directional movement. Platforming, that should be a good bit. Falling, that should be something worth talking about. There's a bit about ladders in there for some reason. I don't know why. Manual attack aiming. Backstabs. There's a big bit on backstabs. And then there's a summary at the end. Okay. It's bad because it's different. No way he's using that argument for something that didn't need changes, just improvements. Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I think the thing is that Domo is trying to throw that onto Mahler, saying that because it's different, it's bad. I think is what he's inferring. He hasn't said that directly here, but he has made it a point that, you know, basically the camera can fix this issue because you can look around with the camera, which affects your directional movement. It's like, yes, that is a way to direct where you go, and you can do that on PC very well because of just the mouse, right? And on console that works decently well with the camera controlling, right? But the movement of your character on its own has an issue. That issue's not being... That issue is being sidestepped when you use the other control functions to make it work, right? It'd be similar to if you have an attack function where you only can attack once, even if you're spamming the button, right? Like, if that is that would be a mechanical problem in and of itself. If you hit the block button afterward and it reset your animation where you could attack again, that would be a way around it, but the problem would still persist because you can only make it work. Like, it works inconsistently is the point, right? It's inconsistent to the previous games, right? It's inconsistent based on a franchise it should be a part of and from a developer who has gotten this right in the past. The issue is that it does not work the same like the previous ones, and the workaround doesn't fix the issue that the movement is worse as a result of the difference, right? It's not one of those things where it's a different stylistic thing, right? Like, this is one thing. Like, the difference in the way Estus works in this game is an actual difference that is a stylistic difference, where instead of upgrading Estus in chunks and then giving specific items to upgrade them to Firekeepers, you find the little sublime bone dust, and then you upgrade your flasks by finding little flask shards around the world, right? That's a very different system, but it's a very different system that on its own is not inherently bad given what is introduced in the game, right? In isolation, it's not actually that bad of an idea, right? It is a bad idea when you take movement that was better in the previous game and purposely downplay it and purposely make it worse, right? That is an active fuck up, right? That's either a negligence of not paying attention to what you're doing during the development process, or you are just outright just bad at your job and don't know how to make movement on the same level as Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls, which frankly shouldn't be that hard considering, again, this studio made both of those games like 3 and 5 years prior to Dark Souls 2's release, right? Like, they should have gotten this right, and that's the biggest thing that sort of haunts Dark Souls 2 in general. Is there are so many things in this game that could have been balanced, could have been interesting, and could have been engaging in a progressive way for the series where things did change for the better. The problem is a lot of these ideas don't account for each other, and a lot of these ideas are just fundamentally built off of the developers not understanding the systems of the previous games, right? Now, this game did not have to be like Demon Souls, even though it has a lot of similarities, right? It did not have to be like Demon Souls. It should have been like Dark Souls to a large extent, right? And I'm okay with like mechanical change-ups as long as they're like contextualized, in a way that helps with the world, for example, right? Like, I think the change from chunk Estus, where you get a big chunk of 5 every time you like Kindle, versus the shards. I like the shard system. I think it's a decent system. The problem with it, though, is that because you have so little shards in the beginning, it forces you. It doesn't force you, but it makes you want to use life gems, and then life gems become a crutch that you can use throughout the majority of the game, right? And that radically fucks up the balancing of the game in terms of the combat and stuff. But getting back to the movement point, Mahler made a point that the movement was a step down because it is an 8-directional snap point system as opposed to the 360 degrees movement that was typical of the previous 2 games. And then Domo saying that the camera movement is a way to get around it does not own Mahler's point. It does not counter Mahler's point. He simply says there's a way around it where it's not as difficult. It's like, yes, you are, but this is the thing where you are both correct. You are both correct in this way, but that still does not negate Mahler's point that the movement in Dark Souls 2 intrinsically has a problem that the other games do not have. This is not an own. This is not a counter-argument. You have simply pointed out a way to get around the bullshit, which is quite often what I've seen when people talk about the difficulty of Dark Souls 2, is you're like, yeah, there's bullshit in the game, and then there are ways around it, right? But the ways around it are often the same sort of shtick, where you're not dealing with the problem in a productive way, you're just kind of using the game against itself. Alright, I need to catch up on chat. Alright, hope you won't be defending platforming. It's known to be the worst part of every Souls game. I agree. This is one of those things where platforming should not have been a thing in most of these games, right? Unless it's a very simple, like, dropping from one area to the next, there should not be any sort of, like, jumping, platforming, none of that shit. Like, these games just suck at it. It should not be a thing. No, I didn't mean to delete that. Well, I can't, Well, I can't undelete your deleted message, so here we are. Oh well, but yeah, if you turn the camera on console, you gotta do that claw grip, which is very uncomfortable. I mean, you don't technically have to do the claw grip, but it is one of those things where if you have to control movement of your character, like here's the thing, right? We all play video games where you control your movement based on the actual movement of the character and the movement of your camera at all times, right? That's a pretty standard practice amongst most games that use any sort of three-dimensional movement, right? You have something that moves your body, and then you have something that moves your camera. That's pretty normal, right? And intrinsically, there's nothing wrong with that sort of philosophy. The issue with this is that this game has a high propensity for locking onto targets, right? which makes all of the combat function better when you can lock onto your target, right? It means that you should be facing your enemy, at which point your camera can no longer be used for movement, right? So the movement itself has to be consistent with the previous systems in place, or has to work decently enough to to be able to deal with the encounters in the game. And while you can deal with the encounters in the game, the fact that the movement is more restrictive than previously for no real reason, it either seems like a blatant screw up on the developer's part where they just don't know what they're doing, they intentionally did it to fuck with players, or they just weren't thinking about it and it got through without them realizing that they had to develop it into more than 8 directions instead of or they had to develop it into more than 8 directions. It's just natural to do now. I struggle to play 3D games where you can't control your camera easily. Yeah. But it's also one thing too, is like these games, this is a problem both in terms of how it affects gameplay as well as consistency between games, right? This is an inconsistency the other games do not have, right? Like as far as I'm aware, like Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne don't have this snap point system. Like they have the actual 360 degree thing when you play it on console. I mean, again, I play on PC, so that's I don't notice the issue unique to Dark Souls 2 because I just play these on PC. But there is a point in Mahler's clips where he shows them moving in this weird sort of way, where there's kind of snapping between point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
I try to move a little bit to one side and the game snaps to 90 degrees. I managed to correct it, but this is incredibly frustrating.
I've never had that happen to me, and when testing it I can only get a 90-degree turn if I pull my stick to the left. Did he really move his stick just a little bit to one side? To me it looks like he blames the game for his own mistakes, but maybe it's also a controller issue or something that got patched out.
I mean, again, this is one thing is like Mahler's point is about that he snaps to a different location, right? And it screws up his movement. Your clip is literally showing you snapping to one of the snap points that he mentioned. Again, this is not you countering his argument. This is you kind of inadvertently proving it with your own footage.
I try to move a little bit to one side and the game snaps to 90 degrees. I managed to correct it, but this is incredibly frustrating.
I've never had that happen to me, and when testing it I can only get a 90-degree turn if I pull my stick to the left. Did he really move his stick just a little bit to one side? To me it looks like he blames the game for his own mistakes, but maybe it's also a controller issue or something that got patched out.
I'm not really sure about the controller thing and the patched out thing he's talking about, because I don't know if he's talking about Scholar of the First Sin or if he's talking about base game Dark Souls 2, but either way, I would assume that there wouldn't be any patches for that game around the time of Mahler's videos, right? Because I think they all came out in like 2017-ish. Like 2017, I think, was when all those videos came out. So all the patches for Dark Souls 2, at least the base game, should be well over. Scholar may have gotten a couple extra patches, but just bringing up the patches and controller issues right there just seems like a weird thing to kind of throw in there. I mean, maybe it's him trying to be honest and maybe it's him trying to be open-minded to maybe an issue that maybe Mahler uniquely had for X, Y, or Z, but I don't know. It seems like a weird thing to put in here, especially after the whole like clips that he's been using as sort of gotcha moments. We know you never had that happen to you, Domo. You seem to have a strictly 100% positive experience in DS2. See, can we just comment on the fact he's made this in response to a nearly 10-year-old video series? Yo, Vangeris. Yo, Shane. How's it going? Yeah, and he's doing it terribly too. Well, this is one thing, is like I think you should be able to respond to anything no matter how old it is. I don't think that really matters, right? I think that's the beauty of the internet. You can respond to stuff that's however old if you want to. Now, in terms of relevancy, I don't think many people are going to watch this unless they're going to react to it because they are fans of Mahler, or they're going to react to it because they love Dark Souls 2 and hate Mahler, right? Like I think this series relies heavily on whether you agree with Mahler or disagree with Mahler in terms of his like Dark Souls 2 coverage. So I feel like that's kind of the thing. Like my thing is, I don't think you should make content that is so dependent on someone else's audience, right? Or someone else's sort of notoriety. You know, this is kind of one reason why I try to stay out of like interchannel drama and all that stuff. Well, sometimes I find it kind of interesting. It is kind of a thing where I'd rather just cover like a thing, like a game or a movie or whatever. Now, reacting to videos, that's different. That's just fun. But it is one of those things where it seems kind of weird how this series sort of lives and dies based on Mahler's direct coverage. Let's see. Bro's on his way to the he who must not be named list along with the Bloodborne guy. Yeah, let's hope we don't get too far into just stupidity. That would be... I hope it does. This is one thing. As long as you're a consistent sort of creator, I can get over certain things. Like, but like whenever you like seem calm, collected, and something weird and crazy comes out, like it's just like what? Thankfully, well, I say thankfully, but thankfully he's been relatively consistent in his sort of nitpicky retardation, if that's the best phrase to put it. That's really mean, but I mean, a lot of his nitpicks have been stuff that is sort of like there's a point that could be made in some parts, and then other times he's just blatantly showing things that contradict the point he's making, or he's completely talking past Mahler. It's a very common issue with these video series at this point. See, I think he's showing that his movement only snaps to the 45 degree, but Mahler says it snaps to 90. Yeah, I think it is one of those things where I think Mahler could have phrased it better in terms of the clip that we just saw. Because I don't know how much Mahler wanted to adjust his movement, but the fact that his character did adjust that far is one of those things that I think could become an issue. And I could see that maybe Mahler should have worded it better in a way to get across that maybe he was trying to do something and maybe he used his controller a little too aggressively to like the left side or whatever. But Domo's footage, while it does seem to counteract the 90-degree snap thing, there is still the problem of all the snap points that appears in the clip that Domo puts up of himself playing the game. You know, so while the 90-degree thing that Mahler talked about might be an anecdote that might be a unique case just to him, I think that the overall point that the snap point system can be frustrating to deal with when dealing with movement, I think is still a valid point on its own. And I think it's a thing where maybe Mahler should have done a better job of scripting that particular part, but also that there should have been he should have been more sort of explicit in terms of what the problem was, which I think he has more than one clip of the movement being strange and weird. So he might show this in here, but I don't know. His response series is about, I think, half the length of Mahler's. So he's not going over every individual point he makes. It seems like he's making little videos that go over some broad thing like this. So I don't think he'll show every single clip, obviously, but it is one of those things where I think that, I think, again, this is a thing where Domo made, I think, a decent point with like the controller thing, but it does seem a little odd when he's showing the snap point system being snap pointy, and I'm curious to think if he thinks this completely negates Mahler's argument about the snap points or not. Because it seems to be in line with Mahler's footage at this point. Not the 90-degree angle one, but the one about the snap points. Let's see. Sheep, he made that list for me as soon as I heard his AI voice. LeMayo, true, Andrew, but then again, I don't know if I'd even want to hear his voice after getting a taste of his script. That comment screenshot you put in the Discord had me in stitches. Actually, I need to check. Oh, where did I put that? Man, never mind. All right, back to the video. Let's see what he's. See, we should be getting into platforming, which should be interesting. Why do you keep Sheep? Are you accidentally deleting messages, or is it a thing where like YouTube's doing something, because I can try to fix it if YouTube's doing something. I don't know what I can do, but I can at least try. Oh yeah, that screenshot was glorious. Oh my god, it was great. Sheep, stop deleting comments. Yeah. Anyway, while Sheep figures out how his typing works, let's get back to this.
This is horrendous when considering exploration and platforming.
Dude, the controls are so dumb.
Platforming? Really? Has this ever happened to you? In DS1 I...
Has this ever happened to you? But where you intentionally screw up something?
And platforming.
Dude, the controls are so dumb.
Platforming? Really? Has this ever happened to you? In DS1 I had more issues with platforming when using L3 for jumping, as I often accidentally input tiny changes. Even trying to run straight feels more shaky. To me, platforming in DS2 always felt more accurate, as I will run perfectly straight.
What the fuck kind of argument is this? You purposely put clips of you fucking it up in Dark Souls 1, and then put clips in you going in a straight line or using a weapon attack in Dark Souls 2. What kind of bullshit argument is that? It's like comparing apples to ground beef. It's like they're not even in the same category. Like, you're blatantly showing footage that is just not comparable based on your own choices in those clips. What is this? I hear you, and to be fair, the snap points effect movement, which is super important, so I don't know why you defend it. Like, it's not fully broken, but it is flawed. Yeah. I'm accidentally deleting messages. The thing is so sensitive. Are you watching this on, like, a phone, Sheep? Is that why? Because I got big, grubby fingers. I can understand if trying to do things on a phone with chat and everything gets all pokey. No, Vangaris, that clip is accurate if you have stick drift like I do, LeMayo. Well, that's the thing. If you've got, like, a stick drift problem, gotta work on that. We gotta work on that. Yeah. Hey look, he went in a straight line and didn't use any controller input to change direction. Wow, Dark Souls 2 better. Woo! Yeah, you're on your phone. Yeah. My thing is just take it slowly. Take it slowly is the best advice I can give you, because with phones, it's just your fingers are as big as your fingers, so you really can't change it as far as I know. But if you accidentally retract a message, just retype it. we will be patient and listen. I'm watching on a tablet and commenting on my phone, to be fair. Tablet does not like trying to type comments. That's weird. Again, he showed 3 clips of him purposely not moving in other directions other than forward. This is not like he purposely shows clip of him screwing up in Dark Souls 1, where he purposely mis-aims his character, and then he shows clips in Dark Souls 2 where he purposely goes in a straight line. Do you understand what manipulating evidence is? It's like, oh my, brain rot. Trying to type on tablets is miserable. The keys are enormous and it takes ages to type words out. I'm not a tablet guy. My thing is, like, to all the tablet people out there that love tablets, I'm glad you enjoy the tablets, but if you're going to get a phone that's so big to the point of being a computer, you may as well just get a computer. And if you're got a computer and you want to get something that's touchscreen, you may as well just get a phone. I don't think he's purposely doing it in Dark Souls 1. I mean, there is a... Well, this is one thing, though, is... Let's go back to the beginning of his Dark Souls 1 parkour clip. Because it's very strange how he is in line to make it past the pathway that we're going to see, and then he purposely drifts a different direction, right? Or he unintentionally drifts another direction based on the movement system being more free in Dark Souls 1. I think either way you slice it, he's fucked up. Like, he screwed up his point with this.
Dude, the controls are so dumb.
Platform.
See, look at that. He has got a straight line to that doorway, and then he screws it up. So
Really?
he screws it up at the last possible second. Now, part of that is because of the platforming mechanics of the button mashing that needs to take place for this to work. So part of that is something that I totally understand. All the Souls games suffer from this. It sucks. But with the clip he showed, he turned a little bit. And that's one thing. That's not happening in Dark Souls 2 because the movement is more restrictive. And yes, while platforming in general sucks across all these games, it is rather odd when he shows that clip of him being in line and then he adjusts somehow, when in Dark Souls 2 he doesn't seem to adjust at all. And this is also one thing too. This stuff is very hard to sort of prove definitively from both ends unless you actually show a clip of your controller doing stuff while you're actually playing the game, right? It's one of those things that's very hard to accurately portray the difference between your input and the game's input, and that's part of the reason why this argument's why these arguments about movement are very hard to sort of discern 100% objectively, because we can't see what they're doing with their hands, right? And again, this is a thing where this is different on PC, right? Because PC doesn't have the movement spinning like controller stick, right? But in terms of just console stuff, this seems like a thing where he is trying to prove a point that inadvertently proves the point against him here. Because if he didn't intentionally mean to change the direction of this run, then it means that the Dark Souls system is a little bit finickier than Dark Souls 2, but the movement is more free. So I think it's one of those things where at worst it's a misstep on his part towards, or worst case scenario is, a worst case scenario for Dark Souls 1's sake is that he's taking footage of the game where the controller is sensitive enough where movement can be slightly changed depending on the inputs of your controller's direction. The best case scenario for Dark Souls 1 is that he's just manipulating it where he intentionally moved. And again, we can't really see what he's doing because, he doesn't have a camera on his controller while he's doing this. Anyway. Yeah, let's see. I've had tons of moments where the 360 controls being as sensitive as they are, it's easy to move an inch to the left and miss a jump as you click the stick. Yeah, that's one thing I can understand. And I've had that problem while playing the games on... the only game I've played on consoles are Demon's Souls and Bloodborne, and they both have this issue. But it is a thing where this point, while you can have problems platforming in all of the games, this point in particular is problematic for Domo's argument because it's showing that Dark Souls 1 has a little bit more free movement than the snap points in Dark Souls 2. So even though there might be an issue with... I mean, this is hard to prove definitively unless you're recording your controller inputs in real time with the game. But it is just one of those things where I don't think this point helps him. I think it actually hinders him a little bit. It's like, yes, Dark Souls 1 doesn't have perfect movement, right? But again, the issue is that Dark Souls 2's controls are a step back. It's also a thing where just showing different clips it is part of the problem as well, because he is, the jumping mechanics in Dark Souls are terrible, right? Just as a franchise as a whole, all the jumping mechanics are terrible, right? But this is also a thing where he's not showing apples to apples in his clips, and that's part of the problem as well, is he is choosing a clip in Dark Souls 1 where you have to sprint and then jump, and he's comparing that to him just moving forward in Dark Souls 2. Those are not the same mechanically. They're not the same in terms of the challenge to overcome. And they don't require the same types of movements to enact the clip that he's making. Right? He's fundamentally comparing clips that do not work together. Like they are not the same type of clip that you can draw different conclusions from. They are fundamentally different clips because of the stuff he is doing mechanically in those clips. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Let's see. I only use my... He at least should have given more evidence for DS1. DS2 gets multiple defense points, yet he only shows one DS1 clip. Yeah, because DS1 bad, sheep. Of course, Andrew. DS1 bad, DS2 way better. See, what's your take on Elden Ring's jumping? I mean, I'm glad that we have a dedicated button for jumping. I think having a dedicated button for jumping is good that doesn't rely on input from any other source. That should have been in the games for a long time if you're going to do any sort of platforming. Right? Any sort of platforming needs dedicated jump buttons, right? Or needs some sort of dedicated action that's not going to be difficult to control. In the Souls series, it was just terrible. Let's see. All right. Where am I at? DS2 bringing in jump with the left stick button was a godsend. One thing DS2 has that Bloodborne doesn't. Wait a minute, so this is one thing, right? Like, I purposely don't try doing a bunch of jump shit in these games just because I know it's terrible. Like, I purposely avoid it because of how clunky it is. I also don't know the differences between the Souls series and Bloodborne's controls in terms of, like, console versions. Anyway, but let me make this one point about the clip he's showing with the platforming here, and then we'll go back to and then we'll keep progressing because I do want to show this, right?
Dude, the controls are so dumb.
Platforming.
All right, see, straight line. He is going to make a sprint and then jump. And he twists at the last possible second. All right, that could be a him screw up. That could be the controller screw up. But it is one thing where in this clip he is showing a character sprint jumping to get somewhere, right? Okay, we can talk about that, right? Sprint jumping is kind of a weird thing in this series that should be talked about, and we should compare apples to apples, right? Now watch the follow-up clip.
Has this ever happened to you? In DS1 I had more issues with platforming when using L3 for jumping as I often accidentally input tiny changes. Even trying to run straight feels more shaky. To me, platforming in D...
Alright, see, look at this. See this first example? He didn't use jump. He didn't use sprint. He simply did an attack.
DS2 always felt more...
And he fell down. Okay, we are already fundamentally, from the baseline, comparing different types of clips. That's part of the problem with this. Right? If you wanted to compare certain parts of the game to each other, I would compare different parts where you are doing the same thing mechanically. Right? Like this clip of, running from one thing to the other. This also doesn't help that he's removing his HUD, right? Because if you can see his HUD, you could see his stamina go down if he was sprint jumping, right? But this is part of the problem, is he's showing clips that are not like each other in comparison, right? And it's one of those things where you choose what you put in your video, right? You choose what clips to put in, right? You choose what to edit in, and in what order to edit them in, right? He is intentionally putting clips in, multiple clips, in Dark Souls 2 that are fundamentally different mechanically than what is being shown in Dark Souls 1. He is comparing two things that are different and saying Dark Souls 2 is better. That is blatantly dishonest, right? If you wanted to show something with Dark Souls 1 about platforming, I would have picked one of the areas in Dark Souls 1 where you can just walk off an object and land on something, right? Because that is more in line with what this is, right? That's more in line with what that little clip is.
Accurate as I will run perfectly straight.
All right, see, that was a sprint, right? He sprinted forward, right? That's all he did. He didn't do any jumps, right? Let's go back and watch it again.
Forming in DS2 always felt...
All right, that's just a drop.
More accurate as I will run perfectly straight.
That's just a run. That's just a run. That's just a run. All right?
I also...
All right, did not show a jump clip yet. So he's comparing that one jump clip in Dark Souls 1 to 3 sort of jumps in Dark Souls 2 that did not have a jump. Now this is where I think he's going to bring in a jump. And I think we'll start to see a consistent issue where, can you imagine how many people have screwed this jump up because you have to line it up perfectly to make it work?
Always jump in the exact direction that I want to jump to.
I'll always jump in the exact direction I want to. Well, yeah, it's because there's 8 snap points to jump. When the thing is inherently more restrictive, your end results are going to be inherently more restrictive, right? I mean, like, it seems, again, he's like sort of talking past Mahler's point, where he's like, you're not acknowledging that the problem is with the the snap points. The snap points are the issue, right? It's like Mahler brings up the point about the snap points being weird for movement, and then he brings up jumping in a jump platforming bit in Dark Souls 1 where he screws up the direction by twitching to the left right at the end where he screws it up. And then he shows clips of him not twitching in any direction in Dark Souls 2. Right? It's one of those things where, again, your footage is making it come across as if you're not understanding Mahler's point. You're making up your own point and then counteracting it with your own point. Right? That doesn't actually discount things he said with footage that is different from the footage you showed in Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. Like, this is part of the reason why... This is one thing that EFAP covers a lot, how people's footage inadvertently proves their own point wrong. They're just drawing their own conclusions and thinking other people see what they see in the clip. Right? Like they think that their opinion informs this clip as opposed to the clip informing an opinion. Right? And there's a problem within that.
There is more platforming in DS2, but to me it always felt a lot more accurate than in DS1.
In this next jump I managed to reach the first increment from turning, but not the second one. The second may have allowed me to pass the jump. Had the controls allowed for 360 degrees, then the jump would have been possible.
How often do people really try to jump diagonally to the left instead of straight ahead? And I'm pretty sure that this rock is a dead end, or at least rather risky. The regular path is a lot easier.
Combined.
I mean, again, he's doing that thing where Mahler's trying to use the movement system sort of like the previous game, where you had a more freeform approach to, like, jumping. And then he just shows essentially the same mechanical clip over and over and over of just go in a straight line, go in a straight line, go in a straight line, go in a straight line. Do you understand that the point is not going in a straight line that is the problem? The problem is that moving from one line to the other with the snap points screws up movement when your movement can change at the drop of a hat, right? Dark Souls 1 gave you more options and more control, so the better you were at with controlling it, the more accurate your movement could become. In Dark Souls 2, it's a lot more restrictive. You showing clips of you just running in a straight line over and over and over does not counteract his talk about snap points. The snap points are the thing that fuck up movement. Moving straight and jumping at the right time is not his point. You're just proving that point. You're proving your own point, which is just moving forward and jumping at the right time works. That doesn't counteract the snap point argument Mahler's making. It's just, you're talking past each other again. I love how he just breezes past any point that makes DS2 look bad. You know, well, this is also one thing, going back to some of the jumping in this area, is like, jumping through these little areas is incredibly annoying because of the movement restrictions, as well as the jumping sort of wind up and follow through, right? Let me mute this for a second. So, like, there's a jump. All right, so he jumps there, lands, rolls off. Rolls off, right? It's one of those things where putting that there to try to get players to parkour, right, when it takes a decent bit of space to wind up a jump, because it's not like Elden Ring where you can just jump in place. You have to build up speed to jump, right? And then you have to, take into account the roll afterwards. That affects where you can go. So again, this is one of those things where just his, just the jumping and parkour system has been shit in all 3 Dark Souls games, right? There's no defending it. It's always been terrible, right? The platforming is not a problem of timing, jumping, and stuff like that. The problem is the snap points. And again, he keeps talking past Mahler's point. It's like he's intentionally ignoring Mahler's points and then makes up his own argument to counter it. It's very annoying.
Here.
Combined with the fact that as you turn you are pushed forward, means that you will be falling to your death often. If they don't, then it causes many issues.
Does turning even push you forward? This whole situation seems pretty staged to me as he just ran towards the edge.
Well, this is a Well, is he going to show a clip of him falling off?
He had momentum from running.
Damage increase in general is simply a change, but in context, it can be extremely punishing.
He is again blaming the game for a situation he decided to willingly.
All right, let's go back and look at this because we've all dealt with this in playing Dark Souls 2, right? Where just because your character does physically move, right? Your character does physically move when they turn, right? They do physically move, right? And you can do that by checking the game, playing the game. Like it is possible. I don't know if it differs from one version of the game to the next. I've not tested it thoroughly, but you do move physically when you turn your character. Now in this clip, it just seems like he's not on the edge close enough to actually fall off in terms of the clip that Domo's showing of himself playing.
Combined with the fact that as you turn you are pushed forward, means that you will be falling to your death often. If
All right, so let's go back to that one clip again. Watch.
turn you are
So we're gonna watch this in slow motion. Where's the slow motion? Let's watch this. I'm gonna mute Mahler so he doesn't sound like a demonic alien. But all right. So kicks the ladder down. He runs over to the edge. He's not. He wasn't falling off until he turned. Right. See, he wasn't falling off until he made the action to turn. Domo blatantly missed that in his clip. Just want to point that out.
your death
Yeah.
often. If they don't, then it causes many issues.
Does
Turning to your death often. If they don't,
Now that is one thing I really don't like is how the the momentum and bouncing off of objects in this game is really annoying. Let's watch this.
pushed forward means that you will be falling to your death.
All right, let's go back to this other clip of him bouncing off the edge of that one bit in Hades Tower. All right, so dies there. Tries to jump off. Momentum just pings him off for some reason, and then that causes him to die. That happens a lot in the game, where you're trying to just make a little itty-bitty drop, and for some reason the momentum of your walk bounces you farther than it should. Tonal Loke flashbacks here. I never even bothered to try and get that item because the platforming is atrocious. Yes. I'm glad we got better platforming in later games like Sekiro and Elden Ring, but it was one of those things where it's like, why did we have to suffer for so long? I mean, we basically suffered for a decade, right? 2009, 2019, right? You know, Demon Souls to Sekiro. Parkour always sucked for a good decade.
Issues.
Does turning even push you forward? This whole situation seems pretty staged.
See, here's the thing, right? He's not on the same edge as Mahler is. Mahler was on the literal edge of the object. He's just spinning close to the edge. He's not actually on the edge.
As he just ran towards the edge.
Here's the simplest way to look at it. Watch this clip and then see if the camera positioning moves, right? Back, forward, back, forward, back, forward, back, forward.
He had momentum.
Why was the camera moving if your character's not moving position? Right? Think about that.
From running.
Damage increase in general is simply a change, but in context, it can be extremely punishing.
He is again blaming the game for a situation he decided to willingly put himself into. First off, he is wearing heavy armor, but a higher equip load does increase your falling damage.
Oh man, look at that stark difference of like 50 health. I don't know how much health that is, but look at that. It's like barely any difference. It's like whoop-de-doo. Look at the massive difference.
Secondly, when you do need to jump down somewhere, you can just put on one or more of the many pieces of equipment that lower falling damage. You are supposed to adapt to the situation instead of just complaining how unfair it is that it hurts if you jump down somewhere while wearing 100 pounds of equipment. Even the hole in Magilla does not even deal any damage if you play as intended and wear equipment that reduces falling damage.
I mean, it also helps that you've got a super high level character here. Right, you don't get that health and stamina bar by just being a low level character, which is when you're supposed to go down this way. By the way, it's just one of those things. It's just the smugness in talking about this stuff has gotten really annoying. I can't take this guy seriously, man. Well, this stream will be a little short because we're probably just going to react to this video and then I gotta go do something. But, you know, the pain will be over pretty quickly this time around. Okay. I can't, I'm sorry. You literally have to buy a 10K plus costing ring to make it down there. Yeah. I mean, in reality, if you have, like 2 shards, you can make it down there. Now, I don't know if you can make it down to the complete bottom level with just 2 shards, but his defense sounds like you're playing the game wrong. Yeah, well, that... One of the 3 biggest arguments I've seen, or some of the biggest arguments I've seen going for ultra fanboys of Dark Souls 2 that are irrational, right, are it's just not like Dark Souls 1, so you didn't like it, boo-hoo. You're playing the game wrong, or you don't appreciate it for what it did differently. Those are the 3 biggest defenses, quote-unquote, of Dark Souls 2 I've seen that spread across a lot of the fandom of Dark Souls 2 that are ultra critical of every other game besides it, right? And it's really frustrating to, like, see people just repeat and regurgitate the exact same non-points. You know, it's the classic tactic of, let's not talk about the thing I'm criticizing. Let's talk about the thing that you probably like that's terrible, right? It's like you're already, like, walking away from the argument at hand and creating a new one that doesn't add to your argument at all, right? Like, if I'm talking about Dark Souls 2, if you start randomly saying that, if you start randomly saying that, well, here's the thing. If we're talking about, movies, right? And you bring up, I don't know, let's just pick Star Wars, like the original Star Wars, right? It's like, okay, it's like, you see, it's like, okay, we're talking about that and you're criticizing it. Like, and I'm talking about some of the criticisms of it. And then you bring up just a random thing from some other movie that was a sci-fi movie 10 years before it, right? You're not actually helping talk about the film when you bring up something random that doesn't deal with the actual arguments taking place. Right? Now, in the context of this series, yeah, you should talk about Dark Souls 1, because Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls inform you of how they got a lot of things wrong in Dark Souls 2. You know, but at the same time, blaming a previous game for this game's screw-ups is retarded. There's just no other word for it. It's just stupid. His defense comes off as, you didn't dump 2,000 hours in the game, and because you only played once, your takes are trash. Find these niche solutions before you critique the game. Yeah, it's like, play the game with all the knowledge your first time through. Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where with knowledge, the game becomes a lot easier, to the point of it being the easiest Souls game. In fact, a little thing. Actually, I wonder if I can... I don't know if I can make a poll. Engage. Oh, I can start a poll. I can do a poll. This is cool. I've never done this before. All right. Let's see, let's do DS2 playthrough after finished with Domo. Here we go. Let's see how this poll works. DS2 playthrough after finished with Domo. We'll just leave that up for now. I have a feeling it's going to be a very, very high percentage of yes. I already clicked yes. I knew you would, Sheep. I knew you would. I actually kind of want to replay some of the old Souls games because I like them and they don't cause me pain like Elden Ring does at this point. But, yeah, I think it actually would be kind of fun to go through all the criticisms of Dark Souls 2 in this and all the criticisms of people who criticize Dark Souls 2 and then go through Scholar again, just because I've played the crap out of DS2, the base game. I'd like to play Scholar again and just fuck around with it. Not gonna lie, I kind of want to get back into Dark Souls 2, mainly because I do love poison arrows. They were so good from what I remember. Oh yeah, but poison in general in Dark Souls 2 is just overpowered. Just blatantly overpowered. I mean, it's one of those things that helps me get through the end game. Why was Elden Ring painful? It's a lot of the same problems of the game over and over, of just the game over punishing you. And then some of the stuff in the DLC was just annoying to put up with. A lot of things. I'm making a video going over the best and worst aspects of Elden Ring that'll probably come out this year or next year, I don't know. But it'll be one of those things where I'm just going to be like, okay, oh, don't start him on that. Yeah, just I've got a lot of criticisms of Elden Ring, and they will come out in a video. I don't know when. I'm trying to finish one video at a time here, and it's taking me forever to get through the Skyrim thing. So, but yeah, just a lot of criticisms of Elden Ring in general, and also I played the crap out of it recently for that video, so I'm a little bit burnt out on Elden Ring because of it. Like I almost doubled my playtime in Elden Ring for the sake of a video. I personally didn't like all the tricks Elden Ring pulled just to make sure I couldn't react based on my instincts. Yeah. Repeated assets, no longer tough but fair, made for normies. Yeah, that covers a good bit of the stuff, but I've got some more specific criticisms here and there. But let's get back to this clip of him just not understanding Mahler's argument for the umpteenth time.
Just because I'm a cat?
There is a reason why the cat that sells 2 pieces of falling damage reducing equipment is right next to the hole. And at least it isn't like DS1 where you can die from walking down a slope and twisting your ankle.
What the hell was this clip? I mean, here's the thing, right? Again, it feels like he's just making shit up to attack Dark Souls 1. And because we all know, right? Everybody that's played this game and gone through this area knows. We all know there's a dragon that spews toxic right before this area. It's really suspicious how his HUD is off. Right? It's really suspicious here when the HUD is off and then you just randomly die, right?
Walking down a slope and twisting your ankle.
Like, why? Like, it's one thing. If you were just showing regular gameplay and this happened, yeah, that's a bug, that's a glitch, that should not happen, right? But at the same time, how many times does this happen to anybody, right? I've played hundreds of hours of these games, and I've never had a random glitch like this happen, where I just die, right? And also, you hiding your HUD, as well as us knowing that you cheat sometimes in the game, makes it look very dubious, to say the least. Makes it look very manipulative, because you're trying to... defending Dark Souls 1 should not begin with you attacking... defending Dark Souls 2 should not begin with you attacking Dark Souls 1. That's a fundamentally bad place to start with an argument. Attacking something someone loves, when they're attacking the thing that you love, doesn't help your argument. You're just... in your eyes, you're just making it worse. Like, from your perspective, you're just making it worse by dragging in more bullshit to this conversation. You should deal with the criticisms of the thing, not talk about something that came before the thing. See, it's fine if a few notable bosses are doing stuff like AoEs and delays, but when everyone is doing it, man, that just gets really boring. Exactly. That's a big one. Excuse me, she has a name, and it is Snuffles. Never had that happen to me at all. Does he not know there's a ledge you can walk over to avoid the dragon? Playing the game wrong. Usually if I walk past that thing, it doesn't have a chance to toxic me as it one-shots me. Yeah. I mean, again, this clip is suspicious, right? On top of having, like, an ultra glitch that, like, hardly ever happens. Like, it's not like this is a consistent wall of death where you just randomly die.
Not over yet. They added this weird event that if the game detects that there is an obstacle between the player and a ladder they wish to climb, it will prevent them from reaching it until you clear the obstacle.
It might be a bit more annoying now, but at least you aren't phasing through enemies anymore.
Man,
This is something that
we really had to get that little dig in, didn't we, about ladders? Like, the ladder point is just such a superfluous thing to make where he's just nitpicking Muller. It's like, oh, by the way, you got this wrong. It is better in Dark Souls 2 for them to interact. You know, it's one of those things that just gives off, like, I am trying desperately to nitpick the shit out of Mauler, so I'm going to include this little ladders point that lasts all of 20 seconds. This has happened to me many times with the ladder or with the sudden death thing. I need clarification. I need clarification. The only real glitch I can think of in DS1 is if you kill Ornstein and Smo is mid-attack, it leaves an attack on the field that can hit you randomly if you go on that part. I've never had that glitch, but yeah. I mean, again, none of these games are perfect, right? That bullshit where your guy just waddles near a ladder in DS2 has happened to me a few times. Would love to see how Domo defends it. Yeah, well, it's just that thing where the game doesn't... again, it's that thing where it's... any sort of little avenue they could take to make the game a little harder, they took, right? Same thing with the ladders, right? You have to you essentially lose control of your character until someone smacks you out of the ladder, right? If there's an object in the way. And also with the fog walls, right? Unless you're entirely through the fog wall, you can still get stun locked while trying to enter it and have to retry, or you can take damage on the way in sometimes, right? It's one of those things where they took out so many things that were sort of safety nets in the previous game for individual things and just made it harder just because, right? Like, there's no real reason to, and this is one thing. While you could make an argument in defense of, like, having objects exist and get in the way of you going up ladders, it is one of those things where, like, what does that really add to the experience when you're trying to get past an enemy and then you lose control of your character for a second while you're trying to get up a ladder until you get smacked by them because they're in the way of the ladder, It's one of those things where they took every little measure to make things harder in the most basic of ways, as opposed to making something dynamic.
we get to have in our Soulsborne games normally, but in Dark Souls 2 it doesn't always work.
What?
Because the system doesn't always work properly. Unfortunately...
See, this is a big one. This is a big one. And this is a big one that Dark Souls 3 actually did a really good improvement on. Right, because in Dark Souls 3, you have a manual trigger that you can select in the options whether you want manual aiming to activate, right? Which means that you can stay locked on and still manually control where your attack goes, right? Personally, I don't use it because the lock-on's there to help you focus your attacks. That should be what it's for. But it is one of those things where Dark Souls 2 has a really bad habit of having your attacks just miss because the game just cannot register you attacking properly for some reason, right? It's really odd, like, when these screw-ups appear.
This is yet another inconsistent or unfinished aspect to the game. When you're attempting an attack, your blade can veer off in different directions despite being engaged in lock-on. Somehow. Yes, this is yet another fundamental system that is inherently broken.
He presents a feature as a bug. It's called manual attack aiming in...
Bro! Showing Dark Souls 3 doesn't negate the problem with Dark Souls 2. You fucking liar, okay? Like, I'm getting really tired of him bringing in shit from the other games when we're talking about Dark Souls fucking 2. Dipshit, do you understand what you are doing? You are just cherry-picking shit from other games to make DS2 look better. Stop. Fuck you, Domo.
Anyone that wants to stand a chance with slow weapons in DS3 PvP will enable it. In DS2 it is always enabled for slow weapons, but I don't see how this makes it inherently broken. He just did not even try to learn how to play this game and instead just calls it broken.
And the workaround is directing it with your left analog stick.
Seems like he never realized that he could just let go off the left stick during an attack to let auto-aim take control. You can't move during an attack either way. This feature is not only great to catch rolls better than auto-aim does, it can also turn slow thrust attacks into semi-sweep attacks. It just adds a higher skill ceiling and lets you pull some tricks.
Backstabs are meant to trigger whenever
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, the mechanics in the game will just randomly fuck up. Here's the way around it. It's like, again, that doesn't negate the fact that it's fucked up. Lock-on is supposed to lock you onto the target. There is no setting in Dark Souls 2 that allows you to counteract the random lock-on fuck-ups. This isn't a system that you turn off or on. The game randomly decides when you do this, or you have to manually aim your weapon with your movement stick, which should be dedicated to your movement, not your attacking. That's why we have attack buttons and lock-on. This is broken. It is broken. I'm locked on. Why would I want my giant greatsword to veer off of the enemy I want to kill? Yeah, it flies in the face of the whole point of lock-on. Lock-on is to focus your attacks onto an enemy. Right? Or onto a part of an enemy. DS1 and Demon Souls I can get, but you can't use DS3. It's made after specifically got a newer console. Well, it's also a thing, too, you can't use DS3 because it came after the problems in Dark Souls 2. Right? A lot of the problems in Dark Souls 2 were invariably answered by Dark Souls 3 design's philosophies. Right? They took out a lot of the shit that restores your ability to regenerate things. Right? They took out life gems. They took out anything like life gems. Right? They took out a lot of shit in Dark Souls 2 because the developers of Dark Souls 3 understood that a lot of the things in Dark Souls 2 were problematic for the series moving forward.
You are standing at someone's back, right? As in, you are at their back and you hit the light attack and your character engages in an animation that if joined with the opponent, they will enter into the backstab animation.
He isn't standing directly behind him. He's standing a bit to the left of him.
Hey, I want to show something, Domo. I want to tell you something. Most of the enemies in this game, you have to attack them from behind a shoulder as opposed to being directly behind them because the backstabs are inconsistent. I just want to point that out before the point you're about to make. Hold on, I'm going to let you finish. But this is a problem with Dark Souls 2 backstabs where they are both inconsistent and a little bit offset from where the backstab should be if the backstab needs to be effective from the back end. Sometimes you have to be doing it from weird angles that are not on the person's back. It might be in the general vicinity of their backside, but it is not a backstab like you typically get in the previous games. Wonder how he's going to defend the fact to backstab an enemy, you can't be immediately behind them most of the time. Yeah, like, this is one thing too, is like, Mahler's got clips in his videos of backstabs happening in random locations of the body. He's got clips of the enemies being backstabbed when you're fucking in front of them, or you try the backstab animation and you just smack the enemy in the face. He's got clips in his videos. I forget which ones they're in there, but they're in there. You can go watch them. Glad we agree on that, Vingaris. Yeah. Well, we've seen it. If you play the game, you see it.
This is how the backstab range looks like. He was standing just a bit outside of it. He hit his shoulder. He was once again not behind the enemy.
You're behind the enemy. This is one thing, too, where you begin your backstab animation and the enemies can still move while you're doing that, which can fuck up your animation of it. That's one thing I've found really annoying as well.
Pay attention to the direction her legs are facing. The animation turned her upper body to the left, but her direction vector was facing perpendicular to from where he was attacking.
I mean, this is one of those things where it's like, you're basically behind the torso. That's where the backstab should happen, because the animation has you attacking from the torso, usually. So, I mean, I think either way this is problematic. I don't think you can actually defend this in any way. I think it is just fundamentally broken.
This is the same in any Souls game. Animations can make it look like their back is facing another direction. Here it looks like I'm still more on the front of him. And here it still counts as a riposte even though it looked more like I'm behind his back.
Hey, look, his legs weren't in the right place. That's weird.
This looks like a failed backstab, but that was just his torso being twisted by the animation.
See, if this was Dark Souls 2, though, this would work sometimes. The problem is it's inconsistent.
Oh no, not this again. Bad backstab, but then good one.
He was standing on her side and not behind her.
Standing on her side and not behind her, dude. She's looking the opposite direction. That is front-facing. That is front-facing. Ugh. Brain rot. It's brain rot.
You are facing their shoulder and the animation is activated, and hitting them in front of their chest grants the back.
First off, the backstab range in DS1 had an even larger circular sector, so shoulder backstabs were always a thing in that game as well. Secondly, would he really prefer it if backstabs did not count if an enemy turned between the activation and confirmation?
That doesn't always happen in Dark Souls 2, and before you make any kind of mistake, what I am showing you right now is the times where it does not work.
This is a safeguard to prevent the chain backstabs that were so prevalent in DS1. The backstab range gets disabled for a short time when they get staggered or stand up.
The game puts in a counter so that you cannot use the backstabs in the traditional way that backstabs work in this series up to this point. It's like you are just pointing out all the problems than just saying it's okay.
He presents it as objectively bad and broken, even though this is one of the many reasons why DS2 was considered to have the best PvP.
I mean, again, this is one of those things where he's talking about like how, like the clip that Mahler showed, right? Back here.
That doesn't always
See, like, watch this clip, right? This enemy just came out of the mirror, right? You can see that from the animation, like, recovering bit. All right, he goes for a
happen in
backstab,
Dark Souls
screws
2,
up,
and before
he
you make any
resets.
kind of mistake...
All right, let me mute Mahler just so I could get this point. Sorry, Mahler. I'm sorry. Okay, but watch this next clip. Okay, just fresh enemy, tries backstab, resets animation, tries backstab, resets animation, tries backstab, resets animation. Like, all of those things should have been backstabs. All of them. They should have activated at some point. This is a thing where he is talking past Mahler's point. Mahler's talking about the actual backstab. Fundamentally does not work sometimes when you are absolutely behind the enemy, when the enemy is not moving, and when the enemy is not doing anything that would be considered a like defensive move to prevent it. Right? Now there is one clip of Mahler trying to backstab the Jester, which of course he might have in here at some point. I don't know. But just the backstabs are a very big problem in the game because they're inconsistent. That's the main issue. Dark Souls 1 might be a little bit simplistic in terms of the hitboxes for the backstab and for the ripostes, right? But in this game, they are heavily inconsistent, and it depends on... And again, watch Mahler's series. You can see clips of him getting backstabs from multiple angles that should not be backstabs. And then when he is behind the target, he does not get the backstab. Right? It's one of those things where it very obviously is inconsistent and bare bones broken. Right? It is inconsistent to the max.
To prevent the chain backstabs that were so prevalent in DS1. The backstab range gets disabled for a short time when they get staggered or stand up.
Domo is basically that person jangling keys at you because they're shiny when you critique something. Yeah, something like that.
He presents it as objectively bad and broken, even though this is one of the many reasons why DS2 was considered to have the best PvP.
I mean, again, it's one of those things where it's like, yes, backstabs don't work like backstabs do anymore. They're much more inconsistent than before. This is a good thing for PvP. It's one of those things where it's like, dude, you just keep telling me that the backstabs don't work as they should. You're just telling me that over and over.
How is that not a backstab? Come on, game.
If we pay attention to the left arm, we can see that this Dark Dweller was just backstabbed. So this is again the mechanism that prevents chained backstabs. He presents it as broken, even though it works exactly as intended and just prevents players from cheesing the game.
Cheesing the game? By backstabbing an enemy, by getting behind them, where their back would be. That's considered cheesing the game? Dude. Dude. I wonder why DS2 has the best PvP. It's literally a meat grinder for players that get invaded. Yeah, pretty much. No iframes to get to a boss room, easily ganked. Invaders will love this game. Yeah, pretty much.
I don't want to sound condescending, but
I don't want to sound condescending, bro. Fuck you. You've been condescending this whole time with an AI program.
have to acknowledge that Mahler presented a lot of his own skill issues and unwillingness to learn a slightly different movement system, as bugged and broken mechanics. For someone that clearly does not even understand how this game works, he is just too confident in his assertions that those are bugs. He did a lot of damage to the reputation of DS2 by falsely accusing lots of things of being broken just because he did not spend a second to try to understand them. Sure, the movement in this game is slightly different than Dark Souls 1 was, but that does not mean that it is inherently broken. It just means that you need to play it slightly differently. And if you do learn how to play this game, it does have a much higher skill ceiling than the other games, as there is a lot more depth to the mechanics. It just feels a lot more rewarding to good players, but feels frustrating to players that are unwilling to learn a few new things.
I'm just letting this clip play.
And yeah, I only included this few night clip to show off some of my skills.
Yep. Well, that whole summary was basically bullshit of Mahler doesn't know how to play the game. He bad. Skill issue. Yeah. Higher skill ceiling. Dark Souls 2 has the lowest skill ceiling because it's often the same strategy every single time to deal with every single encounter. Right? If you got a group of enemies, if you got a, you funnel them to a doorway and spam them. Or if you have a big weapon, slap at the horde, back away, repeat. It's the same tripe that we've dealt with over and over again, where they think it's a skill issue and we say it's just spam, right? Or we say that the game is trying to kill you and be as unfair as possible compared to the other games that we've seen. It's just, bro. Imagine using a mechanic intended to be in the game to cheese it. How dare we? I know, right? Sure, the movement system is slightly different. For a sec, I thought he was actually going to give the game slight criticism, but no. I'm foolish for that. Forgot that Domo's incapable of it. Skills? Bro, you are using a fucked rapier, the best weapon in the game with the lightning buff. Yeah. Yeah, ironically, rapier with lightning buff is, like, effective against damn near everything. But again, it's just one of those things. This series sort of slowly devolves into just an insult party of this is a skill issue. Here's the thing: since the poll is over with a resounding yes, yes, since the poll is a resounding yes, we're going to be playing Dark Souls 2 after this series is over, and I'll show you exactly how hard the game can be for a game that I've played through once, and I will play through again. All right, we'll see how hard it actually gets when we get there. And we can't see the HUD. For all we know, he could be max level. Yeah, again, just all the unnecessary hiding of shit makes this seem suspicious. The intro literally tells you the game's going to bend you over and you'll die lots. Yeah, they even have a death counter in the game. They knew what they were doing. Yeah, it's just, they intentionally tried to make this game as hard as possible in the simplest way possible. And that's part of the problem. And this is one reason why I kind of compare Dark Souls 2 to Elden Ring in different ways, because Dark Souls 2 is sort of what happens when the B-tier team makes a game and try to make it as hard as possible in the simplest way possible. Elden Ring is what happens when the A team tries to make the game as hard as possible in the most complex ways possible, right? And it's one of those things that I think bogs down both games in terms of their difficulty. Love the death counter, best feature. I would disagree with you. But, yeah. That's the video that we could do for this stream so far. I know it's kind of a short stream. I apologize for that, but I gotta go do something. And the next video is a chonker. It's was it like 36 minutes, I think? Yeah, it's 35 and a half minutes. The next video is 35 and a half minutes. So we got a lot to get through when we get to that game, which will be fun. So we'll see what happens next time. I do have to apologize. I am not going to be available next Saturday. I have something important to go to, so I apologize for that. I got a bunch of stuff going on in February, so hopefully I can finish this series by the end of February, beginning of March, hopefully. We'll see where we're at when we get there. But yeah, that's going to be the end of this stream. So again, I've got Scholar loaded up, ready to go. So when the time comes, and we, when the time comes and we're ready to play it, we will play it. I do want to finish this sort of Domo series before then, just because it'll be a fun thing to listen to all of his criticisms and then blitz Dark Souls 2 again, just because it's one of the most blitzable games in their repertoire. So it'll be fun to go through that. It'll be fun. But yeah, so no ESAS next Saturday. Again, apologies for that. I should be open the Saturday after that, the 8th. So hopefully, let's hope that I don't have too much going on. February might be a little bit weird, but we'll see what happens. And that'll be the end of this stream. And I'd just like to thank you all for watching. I hope you have a good Saturday, a blessed weekend, and just, again, thank you all for watching, and God bless.